if you begin from the place of saying that the entire formation of the Israeli state itself, and if we begin at the end of the 19th century, it becomes even harder to sort of, internationalism it's meaningless, right? And again, I don't want to retrofit.
Sure.
Right? I mean,
I would be more clear. The only reason I don't like calling it colonial is because colony usually implies like Britain is making a colony or France is making it, like in Algeria, for instance, which ironically is how the Palestinians saw their fights sometimes. It is like a something. But calling it settler colonialism or imperial colonialism is a little different. The Arabs saw them as like Europeans coming in and being expansionists from European countries.
They saw themselves that way. Herzl himself said we're colonialists.
They saw themselves as part of the expansion, or they saw themselves as Westerners, but they weren't like a colony of America or Britain. Like they genuinely wanted to be part of that land with no loyalties overseas. That was like, they saw that as like the place to set up their new country. I agree that it was something like foreign for the Arabs there. And I agree the Arabs there saw them as like essentially European settler colonialists, but it's a little bit different than like Britain is setting up a colony here, I think. I would just
it's a different type of, it's a different genre of, it's a different flavor of settler colonialism, because typically the colonizing power itself settles. I think that's true. But in this case, Britain is it is the British government that is allowing this colonial project to happen. It is through the British mandate system that we see the real kind of regimentation and codification through Balfour and other things of the colonial project. The Zionists, and particularly the revisionist Zionists, but I would say Herzl as well, but even when you get to Jabotinsky and others, they explicitly use the language of colonizing. They say it. So again, we can disagree with it, but it's a very interesting...
It's like the child soldier argument. Right. I agree that it's like some kind of colonial thing. I would say it's a bit different. It's
a different type, yeah.
And it's also different. Like, it's also hard because of the way that it started prior to 48. Like buying land and kicking people off of it, I understand feels bad, but like I remember for King Abdullah from Jordan, like he literally was saying, I think it was in regards to the Peel Commission. No, it was to the Simpson Commission. I think the quote of his is, "The Arabs are as prodigal in selling their land as they are in useless wailing and weeping about it." Because even though they were complaining, some Arabs were complaining about Israelis moving in, other Arabs were happy to sell the land. Hey, buy this. I don't want it anymore. This is garbage. I'm leaving. Kick out whoever you want and then leave. And I think that's like another complicating factor where it's like,
but it shouldn't be. First wave of Zionist immigration, in 1882.
1880s, yeah.
Yeah, that wave, which again wasn't as successful for a particular reason, was not nearly regarded in the same way as the kind of post-World War I second Aliyah of 1914, right? 1914, because now you have the Jewish National Fund. Now you have a kind of concerted effort to organize not just a wave of people coming in, but as you point out, co-opting of land, of employment resources, etc. And so it wasn't that people were just coming, is that they were coming, as you pointed out, and kicking other people off. But it wasn't just that they got outmaneuvered. It was, or that they were just these, it was that the British government or the British colony, effectively, was creating the conditions, what they called empire on the cheap, right? We're going to be an imperial power, but we're going to have this new yishuv, this new kind of pre-48 Israeli state, be the stewards of this place, right?
Yeah, but I think it's challenging because, like, arguably, all of the other states kind of took shape in the same way, right? Like all of these places, Syria, Iraq, Jordan.
But who did they expel? That's the question.
I mean, they might not necessarily expel anybody, but the country lines and everything were drawn by by the British, and then these countries existed at the behest of the British. Britain, unfortunately, overpromised land via the Balfour Declaration, and then after the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire, to Arab Palestinians and to incoming Jewish people. And I guess they realized, especially after the Peel Commission, that became unworkable. But I don't know if I can necessarily fault Jewish people up to that point for legally purchasing land and then moving down there under the auspice of British protection.
The issue isn't the purchasing of land, although the issue is but the project, the political Zionist project, wasn't one of just purchasing land and moving somewhere. It was the creation of a state that could only exist through the expulsion of other people. You can't have a Jewish state with a demographic majority of non-Jews. And so, at the moment that they said this is going to be a Jewish state, and the project began of transfer. A Jewish state only exists with transfer. That's just, I mean, that's just a demographic reality. And so the issue isn't the acquisition of land. It's what does it mean to acquire land and kick other people off of it. And so by the time we get to 48, and by the way, all of these skirmishes, not all of them, but I would say most of these skirmishes, when you mention these reports, the Simpson report, the Peel Commission report, all these reports are basically saying the same thing. The issue here isn't religious conflict. The issue here isn't xenophobia. The issue here is that the Arabs are being dispossessed, and they're pissed about it. And so,
I agree. By some points, like it had become unworkable, and both ends had essentially felt like they'd gotten by the British. From 36 to 39, the Arab revolts in Palestine were brutally crushed by the British, and then from 40 onwards, the Haganah and the Irgun were committing attacks against the British because the British had then started to severely limit Jewish immigration, and I think the Brits severely overpromised and kind of fucked this area up, given what they were trying to do with it, which to this day remains impossible, is getting two people with hugely contrary interests trying to share the region. I don't know 100%. I don't, like, for instance, for 48, for 50, for 48, 58, the Suez Crisis was 58 or 56. And then for 67, 56. And then for 67, I don't think I fault the Arab states for fighting those wars. Even for Yom Kippur afterwards, I don't think I fault them for fighting those wars, for feeling they had some kind of moral authority to expel the European Israelis from those territories. I think I can agree that they have a right to fight there. I think I can also be sympathetic towards Israel, not to invoke the Holocaust memes or everything, but like, man, the conditions around the world basically made it perfect for Israel to set up the state too. They did get that Balfour Declaration in 1917 from Britain that promised them some piece of land there. They did try to play nice, although to be fair, it was after.
No, they did.
Well, when they agreed, they did agree to the partition
nice.
plan. They did agree to it.
Which, you mean the Peel permission?
The one that came after, I think, where they tried to partition the land, where it would have been 55% Jews and 45% Arabs.
Yeah,
the UN in 47. Yeah. But I mean, but for reasonable reasons, I can understand why. I can understand why Palestinians wouldn't have liked that. But like, there's also a history. There's a history of like, Israel had no recognition from the surrounding Arab states in 48 for its borders. But after she won after she won in 67, all of a sudden everybody was like, well, hold on, maybe we do actually like these 47, 48 borders. And then after she continues to win wars, there's like more recognition after Israel has asserted itself basically in a militarily dominant fashion. And I think that's kind of how, and the Arabs did it too, right? Where people seem to only respect the strength of the other side. Israel gained territory through the acquisition of war, like the Six-Day War. Yeah. And Israel only got peace, and Egypt was only able to sue for peace after doing well in the first few days of the Yom Kippur War, right? It was only after the Arabs had, redeemed themselves in their eyes that they felt like, okay, well, you know what, we can fuck you guys up if we want to. Now, let's do some land for peace. But even that talk with Sadat was a secret one. And even Egypt was expelled from the Arab League for 10 years afterwards for that bilateral peace agreement because the rest of the Arab states were so upset about it. It seems like your position is undergirded by the belief that violence and war and these things are going to at least happen. Now, I'm not saying you approve of them, but that they're sort of inevitable parts of I feel like the history of Israel-Palestine, and I think on a microcosm, unfortunately, see repeat with the Palestinians and the Israelis, is that both sides are willing to cycle through periods of violence because they think that it's going to benefit them, but historically it just has happened to benefit Israel. I think that's been the issue. And now we're seeing it repeat with the after time, the Arab states are like, okay, well, the war sucks. We just want to trade now because this is like a waste of all of our time, and the U.S. gives us a lot of money if we make peace with you, in the case of Egypt and Jordan. Now the Palestinians, I think, are locked in the same cycle because they've been abandoned by everybody. All the bilateral treaties have fucked the Palestinians over. They don't have any allies now except for the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Iran. And they're locked in that same cycle of violence. Well, we're going to keep fighting. I don't want a two-state solution where I have 80% of the West Bank and there's like an Israeli road and military base between every single house we have. It's ridiculous. And then the Israelis are like, okay, well, I'm not going to make peace with you. I tried to do it 10 times in the past. You shot down every single one and you kept doing violence, whether it was the Second Intifada or any of the Hamas attacks afterwards to get your peace. Both sides are like locked on these train tracks where it just feels like they just want to keep fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. And it just seems really hard to break them out.